welcome back to Raid Shadow Legends. This is with me, Mediocre Gamer Man. So, today I wanted to continue on the Arena series that we had started with the last video last week. So, we talked about speed leads, which is, in my mind, one of the most integral parts to starting your team. Speed wins more often than not in the current meta for bronze and silver. But another important part of any arena team is being able to take on the opponent's champions and take them out in as few turns as possible. So generally this is by getting a nuker that can one-shot, or by crowd control with a nuker that can hit them one or two times and take them out. But the integral part of that, what really makes that team work, is someone who can decrease defense. Probably one of the most useful skills, debuff skills that you have for Arena and a lot of content. Clearing waves, clan boss, all of that requires that decreased defense to make sure you're doing the most damage. So I want to go over some of in my mind, the best non-legendary, some void, because with recent 2x voids and some of the stuff that's happened recently, a lot of people have these void champions or have the opportunity to get them. And so I want to do 10, and without putting voids in there, I can't really reach that 10 number. I like 10. It's a very good number. So, but no legendaries. There's plenty of legendaries out there, but a lot of people aren't going to have them yet. So I've got a couple of rares. I've got epics. I've got voids. I've got non-voids. I think I got a good mix to show you guys. So anyway, without further ado, the first one is one that you'll see in Arena every now and again. I see her less and less now, but she still, whenever she's in a team and she's built right, she can completely lock down one of your team members. So Armina is an interesting champ because her kit is one of the more synergistic, I think, for stun champions. Her A1, which can be booked to a 45% chance of placing a stun. It only attacks one enemy, but in Arena, you don't generally have to deal with A1s. And the reason for that is your goal is to do 2 turns. That's how quickly you want them to go. You're going to use the A3, the A2, or the A2 and then the A3, however you're going to do it. You're not going to see the A1 as often. If you do, then she comes in clutch because she's got that stun. With Sniper and her book, she can get to a 50% chance, which is huge. It's not going to land every time, but when it does, it saves you. Then, Trampling Rampage. She attacks all enemies, has a 75% chance, 100% when booked, on a 3-turn cooldown when booked, of placing the big boy decreased defense 60% for 2 turns, and then on top of that, she's still 7.5% of the turn meter from targets under decreased defense debuffs. So as long as she lands it, she's getting more turn meter. But she's also taking theirs away, which helps you from getting cut in and helps her go faster so that she can use her A3, which then in turn decreases the turn meters of all enemies by 20%, has a 75% chance of placing a stun, 100% when booked, for 1 turn on enemies who have their turn meters fully depleted. You don't want her to immediately go after her A2, but having that little boost on her and then using this right after the other team has gone stuns all of them for 1 turn. It's huge. It's huge if you have another turn meter decrease to kind of kick that and make it happen. And her passive is actually really, really interesting, especially if you use like Miscreated Monster or Astrolon or any of those champions that put out stuns. Fills his champion's turn meter by 10% each time an enemy receives a stun debuff. If she's placing stuns, she's got other people on her team placing stuns, you can, with her, completely lock out an enemy team, and then on top of that, just wear them down slowly, because stuns keep all their skills from resetting. So if they did use anything, it stops it from going back, and then it keeps them from being able to do anything to you. So with proper champions and proper placement, she can lock you out. I've had it happen to me a couple times. It's really, really aggravating, but really impressive. So if you have her, build her, because not just for Arena, for every bit of content you're going to place her in, she's going to be useful. There's a couple places that she's not as useful, but she will get you there for a good chunk of content. So, all right. So next, we actually talked about this guy in the speed leads. I need to actually get over to him. Oh, wrong one. We talked about him in the speed leads because he is just incredible. Some of these are going to be dual, and that's actually what you want to see in this game, is people who can do more than one job. And that's Deacon Armstrong. He has 3 champions in 1. So he's got his leech on his A1. We talked about that before, which is really good in almost all content for keeping your team alive. Leech is an incredible buff ever since they buffed it. His A2 is the one we're talking about in this video. Attacks all enemies, 100% chance when booked, on a 3-turn cooldown, which is what you want to see. 3-turn cooldowns on a 2-turn ability is what you want to see. If it's 4-turn, you can't book it down. It stays 4 turns. It's not as useful for other content. For Arena, it doesn't matter as much because you want to try and take them out in those 2 turns. But 100% chance of placing 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. And then on the A3, which he's probably going to use first, well, he is going to use first. He prioritizes this because he fills the turn meters of all allies, decreases the turn meters of all enemies by 50% each, and grants an extra turn going immediately into that A2. This goes down to a 3-turn cooldown. This goes down to a 3-turn cooldown. This, because of that, is actually a 2-turn cooldown because it gets that extra turn, which then brings this up to be used. It's the ability of this guy, because I have him, and I don't even have him booked in my Arena team that we built on stream the other day. And he's absolutely incredible. Build him with enough accuracy and speed, and it's very hard for a team to keep up with you. So, Deacon Armstrong on this list, if you get him, build him, you'll never look back and he'll carry you through. So, next is an orc. I have this guy. I haven't built him yet, and I really, really, really want to. He's definitely on the list of top 5 champions for me to take care of next, like to actually build next. Duck the Pierced. I've seen a lot of stuff about him just being absolutely incredible. A couple of my clanmates use him. I have not, like I said, I haven't built him. I really, really want to, and once I do, I will definitely put out a video. Mad Chopper. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 40% chance of placing a 50% decrease accuracy debuff for 2 turns. Decrease accuracy has kind of come into its own as being an amazing buff to use, especially against the dragon, against Ice Golem, against anybody that places debuffs on you. It's good in Arena if you can do it as an AoE. It's not as useful as a single target unless you know which enemy is going to give you the most trouble. Like they say, they got an Armina. You drop her accuracy, she can't stun you. So, Lunatic Outburst is A2. Attacks all enemies. Has a 100% when booked chance of placing a 50% decrease attack for 2 turns. And a 75% chance, 100% when booked, obviously. We're just going to, from now on through the video, we're just going to say what it is if he's fully booked. Because it's just easier than trying to say it duplicated. So 100% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns on each critical hit. If you build him with crit, you're going to get that decreased defense. You're going to get a decreased attack. The only time you're not is when he's weak affinity. You can build him with extra crit rate to kind of compensate for that. But, you know, just if you are careful with it, that's not going to be as much of an issue. Having both on there is really, really useful. There's only a couple of champions. There's only a couple of champions that I know of that do both. They're on this list, and you'll see them. But to do them in one move on a 3-turn cooldown is massive. And then Shrieking Display places a provoke debuff for 1 turn on the target enemy. Also has a 75% chance of placing a provoke debuff for 1 turn on 2 random enemies. 30% reflect damage for 2 turns, and an unkillable buff on this champion for 1 turn. Drops down to a 4-turn cooldown. This right here, because he can do it on 2 random enemies with that small chance, when he does, he blocks out all but one of your opponent's team, and then they hurt themselves and can't kill him. So he's really, really useful in that regard. Unkillable buffs, unless they have something to remove it on an A1, which is pretty rare. I think there's only 2 champions that I can think of that do that. I'll have to look, but on an A1, I don't think there's that many that do it consistently. I mean, you've got, like, Rosin Scarhide that can do it. You got a couple others that have like a small percent chance. I can't think of them offhand, but I've built a couple of them. They have a small percent chance to do it. So really, really useful. And then, of course, he's got an allied defensive faction, Crips, which for his faction, he is an absolute beast. Use him. But he's useful just about everywhere I can think of because he's got both of them on here. He's got the decreased accuracy, so he's good for a lot of boss content. And this right here means that every 4 turns, he's basically stopping the other team from doing anything. So, really useful. Okay, now the next one is probably my favorite out of the bunch because I pulled her on a couple of different accounts, but I pulled her on my son's account pretty early on in his account, and then I took over his account. I actually revived it not too long ago. But she is a Void champion. Everybody knows her. I like to think of her as like the Wicked Witch of the West almost, but better. Madame Saras is, we don't really need to go over too much about how amazing she is because she's, for the longest time, been considered the arena meta champion for everything debuff related. She has a 20% chance, so attacks one enemy, has a 20% chance of placing a fear debuff for 1 turn. Increases to 30% if they're under 1 debuff, 45% if they're under 2 or more debuffs. They're probably going to be. Tricks and Treats, which unfortunately she prioritizes when you auto, so you have to be careful. They say she prioritizes Midnight Ritual, which is her better ability, but for whatever reason, she ends up doing this on auto like 99% of the time for me, so I just manual her, at least for the first turn. She Tricks and Treats, she attacks all enemies, has a 40% chance of stealing 1 random buff from each target, places block debuffs buff on all allies for 2 turns if any buff is stolen, then places True Fear for 1 turn on enemies who have buff stolen. If the opponent's team has and this goes up to 50% and a 3-turn cooldown. So let's talk about how amazing this skill is. Everybody talks about her A3, which we'll go to in a second. But this skill, I think, actually is just as useful, if not a little bit more so. And the reason I think that is because this is more crowd control than her A3, because a lot of times if you don't kill them in that first round, she's going to go pretty early on in the second round. They're almost always going to have some kind of buff, whether it's attack buff, unkillable, block damage, because Rashka, the tower teams are really, really common. You're going to see a lot of those buffs. Well, she's going to take them. And not only is she going to take them, once she's taken a buff, she's going to stop your team from getting debuffs, and then she's going to True Fear that enemy. True Fear is one of the most fearful debuffs because it stops you from being able to do anything, and then makes that skill that you try to use go into cooldown. So it's super useful. Midnight Ritual removes all buffs. Enough said. High enough accuracy, no matter what they have on them, she takes it off. There's a few exceptions for champions that this buff can't be removed, but everything else, she removes it. Shield meta, she destroys it. Unkillable meta, she destroys it. Block damage, she destroys it. Champions that have counterattacks and ally protections, all that, they're all gone. Then she puts both decrease attack and decrease defense, drops down to a 4-turn cooldown. She puts it on for 2 turns. It's absolutely amazing. That's why she's meta, is because of this right here, where she removes all buffs and then places those debuffs. It's just something else. She also places a shield on herself, and then when she's attacked while she's under a shield, she can place fear. So she is a little bit more crowd control. That's why she's considered so amazing. But we actually got to hurry up. We're already pretty far along on this one. Okay, so next is... Here we go. This one is a lot of people's favorite champion. I pulled him on my original account, and he's just... He carried me through so much. But I think what we're going to do for the rest of these champions, because we're taking so much time, is we're only going to talk about the abilities that decrease defense. Well, and now, you know what? We'll go through all of it. We'll go through all of it. It'll take a little bit longer, but it's worth it. Spot Quarry attacks one enemy 2 times. That's critical. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing a decreased speed. 30% decreased speed. Huge. 8-2 Hunts Master. Attacks all enemies. Has a 100% chance. Has a 95% chance, 100 if you use Sniper, of placing a 60% decreased defense and a 50% decreased attack for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. Massive. And then his lead of the pack places increased accuracy for 1 time each time the ally has a debuff resisted. It's also very huge, especially when you're trying to get heal reductions off on like Fire Knight and stuff. This really helps. Doesn't get resisted often, but it's useful. Let's see. We're gonna have to speed through these. I don't want to take speed through too much, but let's see. Next, but Stag Knight's amazing. I mean, he's one of the best debuffers in the game for a reason. Being Spirit Affinity, he is weak to magic, strong to force. So keep that in mind. Really great for those force champions that people throw in there to throw people off because everybody has magic. So, there he is. Used to be one of the, if not the best champion in the game, or I would say he was in the top 5 best epics in the game. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing a 50% decrease attack for 2 turns, and all of his damage is inflicted proportional to defense. Singing Steel attacks all enemies, has a 75% chance, 100 when booked, of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. If they have a decreased attack laid by anything, it will place a sleep debuff for 1 turn. Sleep's not the best crowd control, but it is definitely one of those that if you place it, your team can focus on one enemy and tear them down while the others are asleep. Preemptive Strike attacks one enemy, decreases target's turn meter by 50%. If the attack fully depletes the turn meter, it will place a stun debuff for 2 turns. Damage inflicted is proportional to defense. He was the original that did that. Armina took it and just shot it right on up with the usefulness. But still, this right here is amazing to stop the enemy's nuker, to stop their debuff champion, their buff champion, their reviver. He could kick down a reviver, which is really, really useful when you aren't able to completely wipe out a team because they've built like Gorgorab with a ton of HP and defense. And he's got a defense aura in all battles, so really useful. Tyrell he's still a top tier champion, no matter what we get otherwise. Okay, last epic on the list is a... Where's she? There she is. Hugo. She is a drummer. She kind of, like, some of these, like, remind me of bards. I know we're going D&D references, but, because they, like, play music and have the stuff in the background. I don't know. I think of that when I think of, like, buffs and debuffs. Anyway, Hugo is probably on this list. She's one of the newer ones, but she's the one that when you see her, you steer clear of her. Black Hand attacks one enemy, has a 35% chance of placing a leech debuff for 2 turns. Chance increases by 5% for each alive enemy, which means when you got 5 enemies alive on the other team, or 4, I guess you got 4 in arena, you're looking at, that's a 20% chance. That's going to bump it up to a 55% chance of placing a leech debuff. It's pretty big. I'm sorry, we skipped one. Maelstrom Rack attacks all enemies, has a 100% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense for 2 turns. Also has a 75% chance of placing a block buffs debuff for 2 turns. The chance of placing the block buffs debuff increases by 5% for each alive enemy. So it goes to 75%. If there's 4 enemies, you got a 95%. If there's 5 enemies, like on waves, you've got 100%. So pretty cool. This right here. Hugo's Brew. This is the one you got to really be careful of. Removes all hero reduction debuffs from all... No, I'm sorry. Yeah. Removes all hero reduction debuffs from all allies, then removes one random debuff from all allies. Then heals all allies by 20% of this champion's max HP. If all allies are dead, revives them with 50% HP and fills return meters by 50% instead. And then Final Spite works well with that. Places a 30% increased speed buff and a block damage buff on this champion for one turn whenever this champion's last living ally is killed. This makes her unkillable when she's the last one standing, so people build her with a lot of defense and HP, and then she just brings everybody back from the dead, fills their turn meter up, and then they are basically back, and everything you've put in is wasted. I hate seeing her on enemy teams because they've always got her built so that I can't one-shot her. But she's the last epic. We've got a couple of rares I want to mention. The first one is a recent addition as well. She was actually part of a fusion. Where is she? So Dagger. She's a void champ, but she's a rare, so she's easier to get, easier to book. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each critical hit decreases the target's turn meter by 4%. It's not a huge amount, but it's something. That's an 8% total if you get 2 criticals. Precision Sabotage. Attacks all enemies, has a 50% chance of placing, 75% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. Not as reliable as another one on this list that's a rare, but it's actually, for a rare, it's pretty good. But she also has Sword Break Knife, which makes her a little bit more useful than the next one on the list. Attacks when enemy has a 50% chance, 75% chance of placing a 25% decrease attack. Has a 75% chance of placing a 50% decreased attack debuff instead. The target is under a decreased defense. So she can place that decreased attack as well. A high one. Reduces turn meter. She's got a little bit more in her kit that kind of helps her, stop the enemy team from hitting you as hard. A little bit more crowd control than the next champion. If you don't have any epics, she's not a bad one to go with. And I know that's a problem for some people, is they just don't seem to pull the ones that are really going to help them out in that regard. Next is another Barbarian, much like Armina. And everybody who's been playing the game for a minute knows her. War Maiden, you get her from the Deadlands in campaign, so she's one of the easiest ones on this. Actually, one of the easiest. She is the easiest one on this list to get, book, and power up. If you get her, honestly, I farmed her. On most of my accounts on my free-to-play, I farmed her until I had her, booked her, got her on up, got her accuracy up so that she could place that decreased defense, and she was on every single team I had, helping me push through content until I got better. I mean, I now have Tyrell, but I still see her because, let's just go with her kit. She's great for clan boss because of her A1. She attacks when an enemy has a 30% chance of placing a 2.5% poison debuff for 1 turn. If you don't have any poisoners other than Kale, she places that poison. Really useful for early game content, getting that poison on stuff. Opportunity Strike. Attacks when an enemy places a 50% increased attack buff. Places a 50% increased attack buff on this champion and places an extra hit if this attack is critical. The extra hit cannot be critical. Part doesn't matter. She puts that increased attack on her, which honestly it's kind of hit or miss, but this can actually hit really hard, especially with it hitting twice. If you need to knock down a champion real quick or knock down some enemy that's got a little bit of health, she's the one to do it. But this Crumbling Blast attacks all enemies, has a 75%, 100% when booked, of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Not only does this place decreased defense, but it hits, and it hits hard. And it's on a 3-turn cooldown, which puts her up there in league with all of these other epics that we've had on this list of getting this out there and keeping it out there. This ability I've actually had, if you build her up high enough, because she's got a decent attack. Her multiplier on this is actually really good, but she's got a great attack. You can build her with crit damage and attack, and she will actually lay people down with this ability. She's not going to, be like your main damage dealer, but getting a setup for your main damage dealer where your enemies only have 75% HP left makes a world of difference. So, War Maid, get her, book her. She's easy to farm. You get her in campaign. The last one is, he's more of an honorable mention than a must-have or a must-want or must-get. Bellower. Bellower is known for his campaign farming. He's known for crowd control. If you're going to put him in your arena team, put him in a stun set so that he stuns the opponents. But he also has other uses. His A1 Frazzle. Attacks all enemies. Has a 30% chance of placing a block active skills debuff for 1 turn. Super, super useful in terms of keeping the enemy team from being able to use their most powerful skills. And if you get lucky and he places a stun instead, then you know CC. So crowd control all over the place. Mighty Bellow. Attacks all enemies. Has a 50% chance, 75% when booked, of placing a 15% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. It's the small boy, but 75% chance. It's on an AoE, so you're going to put this guy in a stun set. That's the best way to build him. Stun sets don't require accuracy, but you're going to need accuracy on him anyway. But stun sets allow him to have a little bit more to his kit, to an already impressive kit. Bowl Over. Attacks all enemies, 100% chance of placing a 25% decrease attack debuff and a 30% decrease defense debuff for 2 turns on a 4-turn cooldown. He's not as strong as some of the others on this list, but his crowd control capabilities, because he's got all AoEs in a stun set, with all of the different little things he adds to it when he does his abilities, it is really hard to survive. I've had him on a team built with high defense, high attack, and he just mows through people, especially on blender teams, because those ally attacks get him to go again with his A1, so he's got another chance to stun. They almost always build him in stun. So he's got a lot of capabilities beyond just decreasing that defense. And it may not be the strong version, but if you have nothing else, or if you have this guy and you want to place him in there instead of another, there's good reason to do so. But that's all I have for you today. That's all 10. Hopefully you have some of these champions that kind of helps you get a feel for what you want to put on your team. I think next with the Arena series, because we didn't do this in the beginning, I think we should have. The next video is going to be about what you need on your Arena team and how to build the different compositions, because there's a couple of different compositions, a couple of different things that you can do. I think that's going to be the best. That's going to be the next best thing for me to talk about is how to build an Arena team. At least to get you into silver, because that's where I'm at. I'm not in gold, but I know what it takes to get through bronze. I know what it takes to get in silver and stay in silver. And I think for a lot of people, just getting out of bronze is really important. I'm hoping that, as we move along, I've got what it takes to build a gold team. I just need the books. The books are what's really slowing me down and getting the gear. But I'm finally able to farm, so that's going to start changing. But for now, thank you all so much for joining. I hope this video helped you guys out. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you next time. Take care.